This is the second video, just giving some background on my new book, Finding Life After Death, a Biblical Survivor's Guide. Albus Dumbledore, in the 6th installment of the Harry Potter series of books, he says this: "It is the unknown we fear when we look upon death and darkness, nothing more. It is the unknown we fear when we look upon death and darkness, nothing more." There are things that we don't talk about. Even as Christians, there are things we don't talk about. We don't talk about death. And I don't think that's healthy. And that's why I've written this book, Finding Life After Death, a Biblical Survivor's Guide, in order to help us engage with this critical topic. For Christians, it doesn't have to be an unknown that causes fear and trepidation. Rather, we can gain a biblical perspective on death and grief. And this can provide us with strength, resilience, and faith, even when facing tragedy. The Bible doesn't shy away from it. And that's what I seek to explain in the book. In fact, the whole theme of the Bible is God's mission to overcome death and darkness. From Genesis, from the fall, right through to Revelation, God's mission is to defeat the consequences of sin and death. And so the first section of the book, that contains 3 chapters, is focused on gaining a biblical perspective on death and grief. See, in my experience, I think there are 2 equal and opposite dangers that Christians have when we think about death, dying, grief, and loss. One extreme is that we tend to super spiritualize it and don't acknowledge the trauma that we go through if we face death. We talk in language that almost limits the impact of death and dying upon those who are grieving and focuses on heaven and life. And I'm not sure that that is biblical. But also, we can focus so much on our pain and loss that we can slump into despair. I actually did feel both of these extremes when I myself went through deep grief. In some ways, I did feel the hope of the gospel that sustained me, but in other moments, I would feel incredible loss and anguish and pain. Sometimes on the same day, even in the same hour, I would oscillate through those emotions. That's the trouble. That's the difficulty of going through grief. I see the Bible holds these 2 extremes in tension. In the book, I write the following: in talking about death, we need to seek to acquire the same balance that we see in the Bible. We don't embrace grief and pain, but neither do we fear it as our ultimate enemy. Death is horrible. Death is defeated. Grief is real. So is grace. And the same God who has provided victory over death will provide us with grace for life, even when we are going through grief. In the book, I want us to learn how to hold these things in tension in the way that the scriptures do. As Christians, we cannot disengage from talking about death and grief. In fact, I believe it's a missional imperative. It's part of our great commission that we have a biblical perspective as we go into the world. It needs to be part of our discipleship. The world is so conscious of pain, of suffering, and of our mortality. It invades our screens every day, be it on Facebook or be in movies or on the news. We are bombarded with the challenge of suffering in the world. And as believers, we need to know where we stand. We need to know what the Bible says. And we need to demonstrate this hope that we can find life after death to a watching and a needy world.